In the first generation, they married sisters. Here's my reasons I give, and you might want to learn these reasons. This would be a good quiz question too. This stops them every time. They had to marry sisters. In the first place, there's no other choice. I mean, isn't that an obvious answer? There's nobody else available. Secondly, who would you report them to? You going to turn him into the police? Well, the policeman married his sister too. I mean, that's all there is. You know? Nobody would have thought anything about it, would they? It's normal. Today, of course, you know, the idea of marrying sisters, oh, wow, it's horrible, it's terrible. Well, somebody's going to marry your sister, and they're going to think it's great. You probably married somebody's sister, right? So, there's no other choice. They would not have thought it's wrong. That could be actually two answers. You wouldn't have anybody to report them to. Thirdly, there were no laws against it. Atheists get all upset and say, well, that's incest and that's against the law. Well, now, wait a minute. When was that law given? Moses gave the law right here, 1500 BC, roughly, when Moses lived. That's well after the creation. Now, in almost every country, they have a legal concept. We call it ex post facto here in America. You cannot pass a law and then fine somebody for breaking the law before it was passed. Let's suppose you're out spitting on the sidewalk and somebody says, we ought to make a law about that. Okay, so they pass a law, you can't spit on the sidewalk. Then they come arrest you because you did it last week. Ex post facto. It's a Latin for something. I don't know what it is, but it means after the fact. You can't pass a law and fine somebody for something they did before the law was in effect. And that's what they're trying to do here. They're trying to say, see, it's against the law to marry sisters. Cain married his sister, therefore he broke the law. Well, you numbskull. Think about it, okay? There weren't any laws against it. See, they didn't need any laws against it. When the race was pure, there were no defective genes, no defective chromosomes. You would not have any deformed children. Everything about you is inherited. Even having children is hereditary. If your parents don't have any, you won't either. That's been proven in laboratory tests, folks. So there's not a problem at all. See, the average human being, you have 46 chromosomes, and a chromosome, if you took a ladder about from here to Chicago, that'd be a long ladder, and you twisted it up. Just start twisting the end, make it like a corkscrew. Each of the rungs of the ladder is called a gene. The entire ladder is called a chromosome. It's called the double helix, and it gets pretty complicated in biology, but basically, you got this long ladder that's twisted up. Each of the rungs of the ladder is a gene. You can look up chromosome in any biology textbook, and it'll show you one of these pictures. Each of these genes does different things. You've probably got a whole section right here of the gene code that's going to determine what color hair you have. It's like the code in a computer. It's a computer code, okay? Now, when you get married, you and the husband or wife are going to each contribute half of a chromosome to the baby. It is absolutely beyond comprehension that you can get a ladder from here to Chicago that's twisted. It breaks in half all the way down the middle, unwinds itself, finds the one coming from the husband or wife, and winds itself back together. 46 of them. Incredible. There isn't anybody on the planet who has a clue how this can happen. When this ladder gets back together, suppose you have contributed genetic information for blonde hair. Your wife has contributed a section of genetic information for red hair. One of those is going to be dominant, and the kid's going to be born with whichever is the most dominant. And you get into Mendel's laws of, you know, dominant genes and recessive genes and all that kind of stuff. But there is scientists estimate that probably of the billions of genes you have, about 3,500 of them are defective. You got about 3,500 defective genes in your gene pool. And it's 3,500 out of billions is insignificant. Okay? It's a 0.00001% or something like that. It's a very small number. But if you marry somebody who's very closely related to you, like a first cousin, or a niece, or your aunt, there is a good chance that the same defective genes exist in her that exist in you, and so you probably will have something deformed on the child. Which is why, in almost every state, it is against the law to marry closer than a first cousin. I believe 3 states still allow first cousin marriages. Almost all states, it has to be at least a second cousin or farther distant related, because you're going to probably end up with something deformed. Either low IQ. Now, what happened in Europe years ago, they had to marry royalty. Well, sometimes the only royalty available is your sister. And since they want to pass on the royal line, they would marry their sister or their aunt or their niece or their first cousin. And they ended up with some strange things. 6 fingers was very common. One of the queens, I think it was a queen of Europe or England or something, had special dresses designed with a V coming down to cover her hand because she had 6 fingers and was embarrassed by it. All of her dresses had long sleeves with a V coming down. Some of the kings died of hemophilia. Hemophiliacs, they bleed to death. You cut them a little bit and they bleed. You bruise them and they bleed internally, bleed to death. That's hemophilia. That's oftentimes from inbreeding. We had a little girl that rode our bus in Illinois when I drove a bus up there, at a church bus. Her mother and her father were brother and sister. 9-year-old boy raped his 8-year-old sister, and she got pregnant. The child rode the bus, came to our church, got saved. Sweet little girl. But she died when she was 12 or 13 years old of sickle cell anemia. She was sick most of her life and finally died at age 13. Close marriages like that often end in disaster today, but that would not be the case when the race was pure. So it's not a problem at all, actually, for several generations. Even today, in the animal world, frequently cats will breed back to somebody in their own family. And sometimes you see cats that are 6 toes or 7 toes. You ever seen those before? Or a little bit schizo. All cats are schizo in my opinion, but some are more than others, you know. And that's oftentimes from inbreeding. Same thing with dogs. When they try to get a hybrid dog, you know, they keep breeding close to the bloodline to get a purebred Chihuahua or something. Man, they're goofy. You know, they're nervous. They're jittery. Something's wrong with them, you know. Little loco a la cabeza. Crazy. That's from the close inbreeding, and that would not be a problem here, but it is a problem today. Okay, let's give a 4th reason why it's not a problem to marry sisters. Adam married his rib. Didn't he? People say you can't marry sisters because of genetic similarity. I say Adam married his rib. It's not a problem at all in the first generation. They would have had identical gene pool. Now, some have argued, well, how do you get the 4 different blood types? You know, A, B, AB, and type O. There's a great article in Creation magazine about that, the 4 different blood types and how they could have easily arisen from Adam and Eve. If you want to go get Creation magazine in answersingenesis.org is the website, or you can get it, or you can call 800-350-3232 and get Creation magazine. It only comes out 4 times a year. And it's like $22 a year. So it's, you know, $5.50 an issue. But it's just an awesome magazine to get and devour on the creation subject. There's a few things I argue with them about. You know, I disagree with them on a couple things, and I've tried to tell them they don't want to hear my opinion for some reason. But I still recommend them anyway. It's a good magazine. So there's not a problem marrying sisters in the first generation.